A very good morning to all of you who have joined in for the webinar session today. This is Vallikanu K, alumni of BTech Biotech 2007 batch, and I'm also the Joint Secretary of VIT Alumni Association. I take immense pleasure in welcoming you all to the session. First of all, I would like to thank the VIT management and VIT Alumni Association. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce the speaker for today, Mr. Suresh Kumar, my close friend and beloved brother. Suresh is a proud alumnus from BTech Biotech 2009 batch. He went on to do his post-graduation in the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, and design interactions at Royal College of Art, London. Suresh Kumar is currently a senior interaction designer and a recognized digital artist specializing in speculation design. He works in Google's research and machine intelligence team to advance new human-centered artificial intelligence experiences. Suresh has led interactions for multiple high-profile projects like TensorFlow, Coral, AY projects, next-gen Google Lens, and has also contributed to Google Pixel Camera, Android, Google Play, and G Suites. Prior to Google, Suresh worked at Microsoft and local projects where he designed Microsoft Office mobile apps and interactive museum installations. Suresh's works have been exhibited internationally across various galleries, referred in academic books, and featured in magazines like Wired, The Verge, Fast Co Design, Core 77, Business Insider, and Arduino blog. Suresh is an inborn artist, a humorous person by nature, and has a passion for teaching. He has handled a number of workshops and seminars for students throughout his career, and it's a privilege we have you with us today, Suresh. Thank you, Suresh. After Suresh's presentation, the forum will be open and participants can post your questions in the chat box. The questions will be read out to the speaker and the speaker will address your questions as well. Thank you, and over to Suresh.
Ooh, thanks for the introduction. And before I start, I would like to thank Vallikanu for organizing this because it does take a lot of time to schedule things and like get the timing and all that right, and introduction, all that takes time. So I'm glad that folks like Vallikanu are doing this so that you all get to access people like me. Again, I get to learn a lot from you, so it's a two-way conversation. I hope we have some interesting questions after the presentation. Sorry. So to give a quick idea around why this topic and why by me, for the past 1 year, I've been a design lead for a product called TensorFlow, which is a machine learning toolkit by Google. And since I spent like the whole year just thinking about machine learning and artificial intelligence, and since I'm a designer, I thought that would be a appropriate thing to share with the new generation, that is you guys. So hence the topic. So let's get to how UX design as a career path in the world of AI. Before we get into anything, it's super important to understand what is UX design, primarily because everyone seems to have an understanding of design on their own. If you ask my parents, they think design is fashion design, or embroidery was the actual word they used. So coming from that generation, now things have changed. People have more exposure. They do get to hear a lot of stuff. Still, I thought it's relevant to kind of clarify what it is before we jump into the world of AI or even career aspect of it. So UX is basically an abbreviation for user experience. And one of the best ways that I've seen people explain design is to basically burst all the myths that are around them. And hence, I'm going to do the same. One of the big myths is that design is about making things look beautiful, which is kind of true mostly. If you're a designer, you end up making things that look beautiful. But that's not really the job, actually. That's kind of like 10% of what we do. And certainly we're not paid for doing that. Like that's actually a very cheap thing. Like we can get it done very easily. The real money that designers are paid for is to do other things, which I'll be introducing very quickly. And to give an analogy here, if you meet an author of a book, let's say, like a fiction writer or someone who writes for a living, and if you go and appreciate that person saying like, hey, all your book, like the whole book spellings were perfect, the grammatical errors were zero, this is amazing. Like, how will that person feel? That is exactly what designers feel on an everyday basis when someone comes and compliments how good it looks or something like that. So literally, an author is spending a lot of time thinking about the content and the narrative, the storyline, emotion, and the complicated things that are behind it. Similarly, designers spend most of their time solving problems. And the only difference is that these problems are not common problems that people are aware of. If you take a doctor kind of profession, it's very obvious what they do because we see the problem in front of our eyes and they fix it and we are like, okay, this is what doctors do. Whereas designers, we are working on very experiential kind of problems. Hence, it's hard for a person who is a consumer of a product to understand what designers do at that level. And hence the word experience design, because we craft every single experience of how a person interacts with the product. And some people even call it manipulation. Like we literally make sure every single tap of a button or a click in a mouse is very, very intended, and it goes according to how we think it should go, not like at random. So this is the first myth. The second myth is designers are creative, they are good at drawing, painting, and crafty things. Again, this is true, but it's not the important skill set that we are looking for when you're hiring designers. Ideally, we are looking for people who are good at empathizing with users. The reason I say this is, in today's world, particularly in software side of the world, or even product design side of the world, we are manufacturing things that are being used by billions of people. And there is no way to actually understand how these billions of people are using the things that we are creating, right? So designers play a critical role in kind of going and talking to these people and kind of understanding their perspective around things. What are their pain points and where are they coming from? Why do they do certain things the way they do? These kind of things are only possible from a designer standpoint. Like engineers are busy implementing the features that are supposed to be implemented. Managers are busy running the company. So it's designers' job to go and understand the users and kind of bring it back to the table saying, okay, these are the features we need to be developing. These are the software that we need to fix or things like that. So empathizing is the big quality that we look for in designers when you hire people. Another myth, design students are paid less than engineering or business students, which is totally untrue. Designers are paid equally or sometimes even more than engineering and business students. This is nothing to say one is better than the other or anything like that. It's just that there is more demand for designers in the industry because there are less design students that are graduating, and every single tech company in the world wants designers right now. So if at all, if you want to earn money, if you don't care about anything about passion or anything, just go and study design, you'll get a job. That's the one liner there. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to kind of quickly take you guys through what a regular day in a designer's life looks like, or what is the process behind this kind of UX design, and that can kind of paint a picture around other things that we're going to discuss today. So generally, in any company like Facebook, Google, IBM, Microsoft, throw any tech company name around, the process is kind of similar. So if you kind of listen to this today, you can kind of generally get an idea of the Fortune 500 companies design process. So generally it starts with an idea. It can come from an intern, it can come from a competitive product, it can come from a CEO, it can come from anywhere, but it starts with an idea. Okay, how about this feature, or how about this app? It starts like a question, and then design team basically takes that question and kind of realizes it in something called a prototype, which is very, very easy way of kind of showing what that product will look like without actually going and programming them in actual code and stuff. So we don't waste engineers' time. We actually try to sketch those ideas. We sometimes make Photoshop version of it and make it look like as if it's a real app. And we put it in a phone and we actually trick people into believing that it's real. And then we get the feedback around how the product is, what would they like to see as new features, and what are the other things that feels creepy in that, like how do they feel about privacy and all these kind of stuff we learn from our users. And then we kind of validate all the core like value propositions of the product. And this is not like a single thing. Like once we go to the users, we get some ideas, we come back, we again create a new version, then we go back to the users, we talk to them again. It's like an iterative process that happens over a few months sometimes, until the team feels strongly that, okay, we have unanimously heard from all countries, all demographies, all age groups, from all genders, we have felt like this product is going to be successful. Until then, we loop this again and again. And once when we have an idea that's strong enough, then we do something called tech feasibility check, where we invite engineers to kind of basically break it down into different levels and see if we can implement it immediately, or will it take 5 years of development time, or whatever technology that needs to be developed to support this. And since I work for the research organization, which is kind of rare, so my case is not the general case. In my case, my process kind of ends here most of the time. So I go and understand 10 years down the line what the world should look like, and I come back to the team and say, okay, this is where you need to put your money. This is how your strategy should look like. We should hire more PhD folks who will focus on this kind of research over that kind of research. So that's where my job ends. But if I'm working for a product team in Google or any other company, the process will be more like, okay, we can build this in 6 months time. Okay, how do we go about doing that? Then designers create something called a spec, which is what generally people see as an outcome from designers. So that's why the whole designers make beautiful thing, what do you call, impression arises, because this is like a very detailed specification of how a product should be built. So it has all the icons and the text boxes, the screens that you see. So if you use like Amazon or Uber or Airbnb or any of those apps, every single screen is basically designed by a designer very, very meticulously for all screen sizes, for all set of operating systems, websites, all this together. And then they hand it over to the engineering team, and the engineering team actually builds it. So this is when the actual engineering team comes in. Sometimes it will take more than a year to even get here. From an idea to engineering execution takes almost a year sometimes. And once when the engineering team builds it, we do testing in-house. We bring more participants, users from outside the company. They use it in front of us. We record how they use it. We ask them follow-up questions. Again, if it's not satisfactory, we won't launch it, because for any big company to launch a product that's not successful will be a huge brand issue. And also, we don't want to waste time doing it. So we will again go back to the drawing board, again prototype, again test it. So the whole thing will start again. If it goes well, then we launch the product publicly. And again, it doesn't end there. Again, users will provide us feedback saying, oh, this was a crappy idea. This was not working, or things like that will be common. Or sometimes press will react very negatively, or people will freak out like, oh, Google is collecting so much data. Stuff like that happens. And then we hear all of those feedbacks, and then we kind of again go back to the drawing board. We create new prototypes, we go back to the user, we show them what we have created, get the validation, do the whole thing again. And that's how releases happen, like new versions of products happen. And this is not something that happens in similar time frame in different products. For example, in Android, this takes a year and a half to complete, whereas in Google Chrome, it takes only 6 weeks. So every 6 weeks, Google Chrome is kind of launching new versions, even though you don't realize it from a consumer standpoint. So that is the world of design, right? Now let's quickly look at what is AI before actually jumping into the connection of these two. Again, there is a lot of assumptions around AI. When we say artificial intelligence, basically people imagine very science fiction thing like Terminator, Ex Machina, Space Odyssey. These are the things that are kind of implanted in people's mind at this point. But really what these are representing in a weird way is a subset of artificial intelligence technology called machine learning. And the big difference is that all these days, computers were told how to do certain things. For example, if there's a door with a sensor that has to open the door, early days, engineer has to write a code saying, if the sensor value is between this and this, open the door. So it's a very instructional, logical kind of way to program a computer. Whereas machine learning is like a totally revolutionary thing where machines just learn from data. You don't have to prescribe what to learn. They just seem to understand something because it's built on top of, like it's trying to mimic how human neurons in our brain work. So hence it's called neural network also. Internally, that's the technical name. So the problem is that since it's kind of learning on its own, humans have very less control over what it learns. Hence, there are a lot of challenges around what this new technology throws in front of us. But also it does pretty amazing things that are impossible with conventional non-machine learning stuff. For example, imagine you being an engineer writing a code to detect human faces in a photograph. It's actually impossible because every pixel looks different when you turn around, so you can't really measure things easily. And also, what are you measuring against? So there are so much complication in that. From a non-computing standpoint, it might sound naive, like, is that all machine learning is? But machine learning is so powerful because you throw any data at it and it will just learn something from it, and it will start predicting the next data from it. So pretty much all the big businesses in the world are based on prediction, and they're all running based on machine learning. You take YouTube, you take Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, it's always predicting what you'll like next. TikTok, anything that's popular these days are based on this particular technology. So I'll quickly kind of show you how machines learn. To get there, we need to understand how humans learn. So as a child, you might remember learning things when you saw the same thing again and again, or if you have children around you, you will see this. They have to see the same thing repeatedly in different form factors, or sometimes they do mistakes and the parents will correct them. And sometimes they have to see it physically. Sometimes, like, for example, if they're learning to recognize an animal, they have to go to a zoo, and once they see a real elephant, they get the scale. Oh, okay, it's not a small picture, it's actually huge. And this takes time, right? For humans, when we were kids, we took a long time to understand this. Exactly the same thing happens with machines. They don't learn anything overnight or anything like that. We have to show them a lot of photographs if they have to learn something. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk about how machines learn to recognize cats, because it's fun and it's a lightweight example. Nobody will get hurt. So essentially, I'm trying to summarize this again. We use data to train machine learning models. Data can be anything. It can be an image, it can be an Excel sheet, it can be how you used your cursor to move around the screen, whatever it is, it can be any kind of data. And the teaching part is what we call as training. And the outcome of it, like the final outcome after you train a model, train a machine learning system, it gives something called a model. And that's slightly different from computer code. Like if you write a code in Java or C++, it's English text code. Whereas here it's a model, which is slightly complicated. So I'm going to avoid this for today's conversation. But it's important to understand this to kind of appreciate the role of UX designers in the space. So hence I have to introduce this. So let's say we have trained, okay, I'm going to go back to the screen and say this. So let's say if you have trained a machine learning model to detect a cat by showing a lot of images of cat, and I really mean it. The models today that are good enough to recognize a cat have been shown at least a lakh or 10 lakhs cat images over and over and again by human beings manually, saying, hey, this is a cat, this is a cat, this is a cat, with so many images. And then the machine is able to say, okay, now I understand how to recognize a cat. After all that, we actually show a new cat image. And then the machine learning model basically thinks exactly like how it's shown in the center of the screen here. It's able to take apart those features and say like, oh, there's like this tongue and the little like whatever like cat features, like the paw and the eyes and all this looks like cat. So maybe it's a cat. Again, it's very important. Machine learning doesn't know if it's cat or not yet. It just thinks it's maybe a cat. So it's always predicting. It's always guessing something. The same technology is powering Google search, Google Maps, Uber, Airbnb, name it, like Instagram, TikTok, every system is predicting, maybe you like this video, maybe you like this Twitter, or maybe this route is better than that route. So this core thing, that prediction, is kind of like a black box. Like even engineers who came up with this are not able to understand why it's predicting sometimes this over that, because it's a high dimensional problem where humans are not able to visualize it more than 3-dimension or 4-dimension. Whereas computers are able to think in hundreds of dimensions depth, and that's why it's called deep learning. That's a more technical word to describe this. Anyway, so all this is to say that there exists a technology that's super amazing, but people don't know what it's doing and why it's doing. And designers are there to kind of rescue them. That's exactly the situation today. Even the best of engineers are not able to figure out why it's doing certain things. And another unprecedented thing is that human perception kind of drives every facets of this machine learning technology, which is weird because if you think about computers, they're kind of very mathematical machines. Like they're built by people who are super logical. They were built by logic gates, and like there is nothing weird about computers. They always do exactly what they're supposed to do. Humans are the ones who do errors. We are the people who have the blurry gray spots and everything. Whereas in machine learning world, funny enough, we choose the data to teach the machine like this is a cat. So there goes a lot of possibilities for error. And then we tell the computer that, okay, now you have learned enough, because the computer always is confident in saying, I think that's a cat. Always it will say that. It will never know when it's when it has learned. It's up to humans to say, okay, I'm going to give new 100 cat images. If it detects all 100, I will declare that the machine learns how to detect a cat. But that's a huge problem. And after all this, we are the ones who get affected by this technology. And the word affected might sound heavy with a cat image, but let's say an algorithm behind LinkedIn decides who should get a job offer or whose profile should be highlighted to a recruiter based on a machine learning model guessing or predicting something. That's someone's job. And life and death situations do happen when machine learning predictions go wrong. A lot of privacy problems are there. So this is a really serious problem. So companies are willing to pump in any amount of money required to solve these kind of things. So hence designers are in demand in that kind of space. Now that we have spoken about AI, let's talk about what are the big challenges. I think I started hinting at the data problem already. And to kind of illustratively explain it, we did a little experiment in Google where we asked, like, I think 1 million people or something to draw something on a prompt quickly. So we gave a task like, can you just sketch a shoe? And this is the kind of sample data from it. And interestingly, only 5 out of 64 people have sketched a shoe with a heel. And I'm sorry, is someone trying to talk to me? No. I'm going to mute. Someone is trying to unmute. Okay. So very few people actually will think of a shoe with a heel. This is totally fine. It's not about gender representation or anything like that. But the fact is that if there is so low representation of a data, then the machine will not learn to recognize that particular shoe. So this is exactly what happens when humans pick data to train a computer model. And we call this the bias in machine learning systems. And it's purely because humans are biased towards something or other. Maybe it's cultural bias, whatever. Bias comes in naturally as humans. We have that problem. This is another example where when we asked to draw a chair across multiple countries, hundreds and thousands of people did this. And you can see every culture seems to represent chair in a slightly different angle. No reason whatsoever, but still it is factually there. So again, if you hire someone from Korea to build a machine learning model to detect a chair, maybe it will never detect a chair in a different angle. So that's a problem, right? Now when it's real, like this is one real example, and we have fixed it. That's why we are openly showing it. On the left is Google Translate model trying to convert a gender neutral statement, which is equivalent of this is a doctor, because Turkish language allows you to say that, to English language. And in English, it has to put one of the two genders. So it just picked male gender because it is trained with all the data in the internet. And all the data in the internet suggests that most of the doctors are male. And hence the machine has learned that the doctors have to be male. And this is a totally unintended consequence. Nobody intended to teach this. But as I said earlier, we can't control what machine learns. We can only throw data at it. These can have more stronger implications. What if it's a job profile? What if men get more job offers because machine thinks that, oh, it is a doctor role and only man can do it? Like that is the real consequence of these kind of technology failing. And again, we don't have good answers for it, but designers are trying to trying to solve this in an interesting way where we are having different ways to validate this. And a solved product would look like on the right side where it will show more gender representations. Some of the real problems from the inside, like let's say if I'm designing a machine learning model for my team, what are the things that I face as designers, right? Let's say again, going back to cat example, all I can do is I can hire a lot of people and say, okay, go sit and tell which is a cat, which is not a cat in a lot of images. So we get a lot of cat images and then we take that image and train a model. But most of the time the images are weird. Like the first two images are easy. Like one is a dog, one is a cat, but the rest is kind of murky based on where you come from. If you're a zoologist, maybe you'll also like call the rightmost image as a cat. So again, it depends on who you are, how educated, your cultural exposure, a lot of things. Similar things with this. Like let's say if I ask someone to label a woman in this photo, each of this characters here represent their gender totally differently. And that spectrum is so hard for a computer to understand at this point in time. But there are so many products in the world that rely on actually understanding whether it's a person, man or a woman, all these marketing campaigns, and all this happens based on gender. So again, very hard problem to solve. How do you solve all those things? Those are some challenges. And some mental model challenges again, like what aspects of AI should we even explain it to our end users? For example, if you use Google Map kind of products, and if you say, show me a route from point A to point B, it'll just give you a route in a few seconds. But the behind the screen, actually, it's kind of doing some 7 to 8 machine learning model work is happening. So it's important for the designers, it is important, and it's designers' job to kind of prioritize what to show to the users and what not to show, what will be overwhelming and what will be not overwhelming. For example, some cultures are made in such a way that they won't make decisions until you give enough data points to make a decision. They won't just trust the system and say, okay, map showed me, I'm going to just take the route. They will cross-check. They need more confirmation, traffic, and like distance and like scenic beauty, this and that. They add more dimensions to the same query. Whereas some cultures, like India particularly, we don't critically will analyze these decisions. We will be like, okay, this is the map. I'll just hit button and I'll start the route. So there are interesting cultural differences between how people expect the AI to surface on top of the UI of a product. Sorry, UI is user interface, which is the layer that we all see. So again, other thing is, how do we introduce artificial intelligence? Is another big challenge, and a lot of people work on this problem. If you have used products like Amazon or Netflix, they do a really good job of kind of slowly peppering in the features of the product as you use them. Initially, they will not overwhelm you with much stuff, but as the machine learning model learns from your user behavior, they will slowly say, based on this, I think you will like this, and they start even creating categories based on what you watched earlier. And those are like really, really hard things to do, because it's not 100 people that you're designing for. You're designing for billions of people, and you have no way to logically know what is going to be these categories, because machine learning models are creating categories on their own. So suddenly in India, if it's Eid, the machine learning model will say, okay, this week Eid special. That kind of thing can be controlled because it's at a country level, so it's big enough to control. But what if it's something very local? It's very hard to predict. So again, designers come up with different ideas how to solve this. Again, this is like a heavily debated thing where designers play a huge role, which is about giving human-like quality to artificial intelligence. For example, Amazon and Apple decided to call their voice assistants Siri and Alexa, whereas Google decided to call it OK Google. Now, this is a very, very design, decision. It's not something that is just decided out of thin air. So those kind of reflect the philosophy of the company, what kind of trust we want to build with our users, what kind of expectation we want to set. So those are the interesting problems there. And again, leading to the trust thing, we don't want our audience to neither not trust us too much, not trust us too much, because eventually they'll get frustrated if they expect too much from the product. And in the industry term is to attain something called calibrated trust, which is super hard, but we try. And with respect to privacy and data leaks, this is like a huge problem. Again, feedback is something extremely new in the world of artificial intelligence, since the machine doesn't know whether it's actually predicting a cat or not. And we don't know whether it's actually predicting the right thing or not. The users will just not use the product. They will just like swipe up, or they'll just close the tab and go away. And as a designer or a product person behind the team, you'll be scratching your head thinking like, was the prediction wrong? Was something else going wrong? Like, we have no clue to understand what happened. So users have come up with interesting ways of solving.
Place okay,
I'm going to mute one more person now. Yeah, maybe. So designers have come up with interesting ways of asking, like, was this useful? Would you like to do this? Can I remind you tomorrow? This sort of nudges, and we do get a lot of feedback based on that. And that's how designs are iterated and perfected over a period of time. So again, this is a huge field. Just to give you the kind of a scale of how big this is, in Google, at least in one team, there'll be like in a big team like Google Search or Android or something, there'll be some 30 to 40 designers, full-time job to just think about this feedback loop. Like, how do we ask people? When do we ask what? And it starts from the day you install the app to 10 hours in the app, 100 hours in the app. When you do a specific activity in the app, when you do something else in a Google ecosystem in a different app, then it can be relevant to this app. So it's a very, very complicated system of interacting with the users. It's almost like a narrative that's going on between the user and this product in an abstract way, but the user is not aware of it. They just think, okay, it's just asking me, I'll just answer something. But these are extremely well thought out, crafted interaction that happens over a period of time. This is the last one regarding the challenges. Okay, we have 1 more minute based on the time, but let me finish it quickly. So errors become more interesting because, again, the machine doesn't know when it's failing, and the users kind of relate to errors weirdly differently. For example, we all trust Google search to some level because that's kind of a dominating search engine. So if you search something in Google search and if you don't get the result that you're expecting, you will not complain that Google search is doing something wrong. You'll think maybe I searched something wrong, or maybe the result is not available in the internet. That's the, like, you kind of take the blame on yourself and you will do something else, or you will refine the search. Whereas if you talk to OK Google, like a Google Home or something, and if it doesn't recognize you, you'll be like, what is this? It's an error. In the user's mind, it's perceived as an error, even though both the cases might have been same. The Google search model wouldn't have worked for the query that you sent. The voice system wouldn't have understood what you're saying, but the perception from the user is different. So it's hard for a designer to solve those kind of problems as well. And again, a lot of complex system happens, like I said earlier. Simple example is Google Maps, which has multiple models behind it. It's very, very hard to predict what went wrong in that kind of system. And all this is to say that UX designers are extremely well equipped to address these kind of challenges. These are not engineering challenges. These are not managerial challenges. These are human problems. These are genuinely like human generated problems, from collecting the data to how you train the model, what kind of expectation you set for the users, how do you teach about the AI, when do you nudge about it, when do you think it's an error, all are human elements. So hence designers are the ones who are doing it. And hence they have become integral part of all product teams in the tech industry. Name a company, there'll be a designer sitting and worrying about this in their company. That creates more job opportunities in the end of the day. All that is to say that. Again, so jumping into the opportunity aspect, like if at all, if you're interested, if you ever thought about it, how do you become a UX designer? It's a very good question, because first you need to ask yourself, how do you know if you're cut out for this? This is like a weird question. Like we always think of like, what are we passionate about? Sometimes it's also important to think about like, are we the right person for it? Because we might be interested in it, but if that demands a quality that we don't have, we'll be struggling in that field, right? So like example, like engineering is a field that requires aptitude. Like if you don't have good aptitude, you may not be a great engineer. Like similarly in design, there are other qualities. Again, making something look beautiful is not a quality there. So one of the big qualities that we look for is when everyone around you is happy with the product or service, you seem to always find different ways to improve them. This is a very, very nice way of saying you complain a lot and you keep on saying, why is it this way? Why the hotel people treated me like this? Always you complain at service level. And those are good qualities according to designers. And you enjoy building things. It's not like something that you have to dread upon. And also you enjoy understanding people and kind of being very patient and unbiased and kind of not judging people, but really observing and understanding what's going on. So if all that matches your skill set, then you basically go and take a design course. You can also skip this and go and join a company and then slowly navigate inside and become a designer, but it's slightly slower process. Whereas if you study design, then it's more accelerated. Oh, so this is just like a bunch of names here, but you can just search online. There are really a lot of universities in the world. Job titles, again, I put this here because there are so many weird names in design field. Pretty much they all mean the same thing. The first 4 titles are literally the same job, just that every company decides to call it differently. And there are some specializations, the ones that are listed in the bottom, that requires more education, more training, all that. This is the final slide. Basically, here I wanted to point out, like, if I didn't know how else to give an impression of what it feels like to work in a company as a designer. And this is how it feels like on an everyday basis. There's a UX team and a product team, an engineering team. They work together all the time in fixing a problem. And there'll be like 2 designers, 1 manager, 10 engineers. That kind of proportion is what I've seen predominantly. Whether it's like a really big product or a new product, doesn't matter. It's the same combination. And with all that, I'm going to say thank you and open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Suresh. That was an amazing session. And I've already had a lot of questions popping in. So I will be reading out the questions to you one by one. And you can actually answer them. And before that, there's somebody who wants to talk to you, Jason.
Suresh, hi. Nice to see you and nice to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vali. Thanks for unmuting. But then I have a very important question. I see a lot of questions coming in the inbox. Suresh, probably if you could just quickly touch upon this. See, how I work for a healthcare company, right? And we constantly work towards improving the outcomes of the patient's life. And we see a lot of research going on in AI with relate to prediction of a particular disease. So how important, of course, it's going to be important, but then how do you see this application in the healthcare industry and how it is going to help the doctors? Because like you gave a very right example of LinkedIn. Let's go one step above. It is going to help a doctor take a decision in curing a patient. That's even more important. Okay, so how is this industry going towards that?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked this question because my team, when I used to work on the machine learning team, we collaborated with Shankara Nethralaya in Chennai, and we basically did like a 6-month kind of pilot program to understand how we can implement AI in medical prediction systems. For example, we took a retina scan and we tried to predict some diseases based on the scan. And what we were trying to learn is like, if we go wrong, it's a terrible idea. Like if we do a simple mistake in a medical prediction, that's going to be a very, very big, the cost is huge. So we were trying to figure out design patterns that we can employ where the doctor is the final decision maker in the end of the day, but these intelligent systems are aiding the doctor to make the decision. So we were trying to phrase this AI system as a companion or a colleague next to you, kind of giving expert suggestions, but you don't have to listen to them. Still, it's the human being taking the final call. So that's where we have gotten so far. Like, we don't have any medical system in the world where AI is making a decision at this point. It's always a human doctor. AI is just recommending things. Yeah, that's my only take, my only 20 cents on this.
Thanks, Suresh. I don't want to take your time with a lot of questions coming in. We'll catch up offline. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Jason. So I'm just moving ahead with the questions, Suresh. So some of the questions are similar and I'm just clubbing them together. So one common question is from the student perspective, Suresh, because you had like explained how about they can take it up as a career, like you just do a design course. And is that the only way of starting it? Like if I want to become a designer, how do I actually have to start?
I guess, yeah, I will say the same thing again, because I have seen a lot of people who don't take a design course and try to become a designers. It is still possible. I've seen really successful cases, but it is a long process. Just because in a job, like, there's no way you will become a designer before joining somewhere, because you don't have any experience to show to even get a job as a designer. So you will first join from whatever discipline you are. Let's say you're currently a computer science student. You will join as an engineer in a company, and then slowly you'll start doing design kind of work in that company over a period of time, and then you'll shift. But it's almost like every day you have to do your actual job, make sure that you're not like fired or all that, and then you have to put in this extra effort to convert from that role to another role. So yeah, if you want that, that is totally fine. But if you want a more faster route, then going to college is the easiest way.
Right. Thank you. So the next question is from Ms. Susan Elias. So do digital platforms such as TensorFlow attempt to learn how we learn in the background? How much of AI goes behind the UX in this context?
Learn how we learn. That's a very interesting thing. It depends on the application. For example, I don't know if you guys are aware of this app called Duolingo. It's a language learning app. The core purpose of the app is to, sorry, one second, again, someone.
Yeah, I will do it, Suresh. I will do it. You carry on.
Okay. So the core purpose of the app is to teach someone something, right? So in that case, they will be interested whether you're learning or not based on some kind of metric. The metric can be a test or a quiz or something like that. But in general, we don't know if people are learning anything, because that's not the motive of most of the products. The motive of most of the products is to engage the audience, like catching the eyeballs is what the industry calls it. So as YouTube or as Instagram, the companies want you to use the product. So the metric is more about how engaged the user is. So learning is never a metric in those most of the digital products.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is from Mr. Balamurahan. When do you prefer machine learning and deep learning?
That's also a very good question. 90% of the problems can be solved without machine learning, because most of the time it's very hierarchy, logical kind of problems. Machine learning comes when the data that you have to deal with is so large and you can't write custom logic to the problem. So face recognition is a good example, or pathfinding in Google Maps is a good example, or any kind of places where you feel like there's no way you can go and customize every single logic. And the reason the data is a lot today is that it's so easy to collect data. Just by someone logging into the website, I think there are some 80 different data points that a website can get just by you logging into a website today. So imagine so many dimensions of decisions has to happen. So yeah, those are the two metrics that I would say.
Okay, thank you. So another question which is quite generic, like from Ms. Niharika, where does UX research fit into this actually?
So UX research is one of the specializations where their full-time job is to go and talk to the people. So when I kind of listed the whole process of the design process, one of the things I said is like validate with users, or go and talk to users and understand what they're thinking or empathizing, all that. That aspect in larger companies is done by a specialized person, and their name is called UX designers. The title is called UX designers, sorry, UX researchers. And the reason that they specialize in that is, as the company is bigger and as the stakes are higher, there are so many legal requirements on how you can ask a question to a user, how you cannot, like for example, let's say I'm building an app for something and I want to make sure all sorts of marginalized people can use it, all like physically challenged people can use it, and all the people who can't talk can use it, like all the like tech literacy, all that spectrum I have to analyze, right? So there are sensitive things that we cannot ask a blind person. So these people specialize in that, and they know how to ask questions without offending someone, and also how to ask unbiased questions. So that's the whole role of UX researchers.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is from Mr. Ansh Mehra. What tools do you use for prototyping? Do you code your prototypes, or is it made on principle or Figma?
So it depends on the stage at which we are doing the prototype. Early days, we just try to do quick sketches of it, or if possible, we'll do it in Figma and kind of, but not like a high fidelity prototype, like how you look at an app. They don't have colors and stuff. It'll be just black and white boxes. There'll be just big buttons. If you press this button, you'll see this kind of. And we try to really find that one core value proposition behind the product before prototyping it. We don't prototype the whole product because mostly the app will be successful if that one thing works. And we will just make sure that that one thing is really working or not. So Figma is the short answer. The other one is the long answer.
Right. Okay, so the next question is from Ms. Sanjana. So what is the biggest challenge that you have faced as a UX designer? Say probably you've told a lot of pros, so any cons on this side?
That's a good question. I think at every point in the career, I've faced different challenges. One of the earliest challenge I faced is people don't understand design. So it was hard to work with engineers who have never worked with designers. So there'll be like really weird identity crisis kind of moments where I'll be like, I'm paid to do a job, but nobody knows what to do with me kind of situation has happened. I think at this point, the challenge has changed because now people have more exposure and they know what to do with UX designers. Now the new challenge is to make sure it's not overly UX designed. I don't know how to explain it. Like it has become a new buzzword. Like ergonomics was a buzzword in kitchen utensils for a while. Now after Apple became very popular, now everything is designed, and it's like people put too much emphasis on design. Sometimes it's just a simple problem solving activity, but they'll be like, no, you're a designer, make it better. Like we can't make something that's better if it's already good. So that's like the new problem that we're facing.
Right. Okay. So the next few questions are like more towards the career segment. So what is the difference between a UX designer and a graphic designer?
That's a very good question. So the way I can explain this is, so design is as broad as engineering or medicine kind of thing. And under the design field, we have so many subdivisions. So one of the subdivisions is graphic design. There's also furniture design. There's automobile design. There's like 10 other, like hundreds of these, not hundreds, but maybe another 20 different disciplines under design. And graphic design specifically thinks about communication. So again, it's commonly misunderstood as making things look good, but they think about how can we communicate something very, very quickly, at the same time communicate a lot of subtle things unconsciously at the same time, and which is a very hard skill set to acquire compared to UX design. UX design is a very problem solving activity, and pretty much anybody can pick it up quickly, get used to it. Whereas graphic design is one of those things that you can't just work hard and learn quickly. You have to just practice it over a long period of time. It's almost like an artistic endeavor. You need to really invest a long time in it. Hence, it's one of those specializations. And in the IT industry, it's called visual design now. We don't use the word graphic design for some reason. I don't know.
Right. Thank you. So like the next question is, how does an engineering degree help you as a designer?
That's a very good question. So design, okay, so let me phrase it this way. Degree doesn't help anywhere. Like after a point, nobody asks you what you studied or which college or what degree. Nobody cares actually. In the end of the day, I think what kind of understanding you bring to the table is what matters. And engineering gives you a way of thinking. Like if you have solved enough algebraic equations and if you have solved logical problems and stuff like that, your brain just is wired to think in a particular way. And that is kind of a value I see as an engineer bringing into the table most of the time, because when everyone is kind of talking in weird, like blurry situations, engineers or people who are trained as engineers can bring the clarity in the table, saying like, okay, these are three problems. We're just going back and forth between this. Why don't we just take one at a time and solve it? Like that kind of clarity, engineers are able to bring to the table.
Okay. Okay. So again, the next question is like, do you prefer a master's degree in computer science engineering or a basic degree in UX design for this career?
Oh, if you have to become a designer, I would say basic degree in design for sure. But again, I'm not comparing these two. They're totally different things. And if you want to become a designer, this is better, is how I would say.
Yeah, right. Okay. The next question is a little specific from Mr. Vinil Tota. Generally, UX designers perform research methods like contextual inquiries, ethnographic research, experience mapping, usability tests, A/B tests, etc. So do these differ when we are dealing with UX in AI or machine learning?
Yep. It differs a lot just because you don't know what you're even testing, right? For example, let's say I have to test how Google Map routes work with people. Whatever methodology we use, in the end of the day, we can't recreate those moments in front of the user, because only when they're genuinely, only when they're genuinely using it, they'll encounter those moments. Whereas with non-AI systems, we can fake it quickly. So all those research methodologies kind of get a hit. We can't do A/B testing as well, because what are you testing against? Like, there are so many machine learning parameters behind the screen that you can't do A/B testing for each and every parameter, because the amount of combinations that you have to test is so much that it kind of becomes meaningless. The curve will just flatten. So, oh, but it's so funny to say the word curve is getting flattened in this time. Anyway, so yeah, what I'm about to say is, yeah, I don't think any of those methodologies are easy to deploy in an AI world. All that we are doing is trying our best to come up with new methodologies. My team again launched a methodology called Triptych study like a year ago. What we tried doing is, like, forget about going and actually recreating all this prototype, everything. Why don't we just tell them a story? Like, literally, we can't recreate anything. So we'll just sit with someone and we're like, how about an app solves this problem? How about, like, when you click this button, this happens? Everything, literally, we're asking them to imagine, and we're just telling them a nice story, maybe showing them one or two like storyboarded kind of visuals. That's the best thing we have so far with AI systems.
Okay, thank you. To the participants, I request you to restrict the questions with whatever is put in the board right now, because we've got quite a lot of questions which will be answered. Okay, I'm just moving on to the next question. Like, from the hiring perspectives in the industry, what do you suggest is a good certification in this field of designing?
I don't have a immediate response to it, because I don't know what are the certifications available at this point. I would assume there are some online courses where you can get certified by some of the best colleges, like MIT, or I think Carnegie Mellon also has a certification program. So if you can get a certification from some recognized name, it just makes your life easier till you get into the interview process, because most of the companies screen applicants based on the college name, and that's like an easy way to screen people. So it'll take you to the interview table quickly if you get the certification from a known entity. After that, it's up to you and your skill set.
Right, thank you. So I've skipped a few questions because majority of them have been answered indirectly. So I'm moving on to the next question. Like, from a student perspective, like a school student, which subject or which group you say is very important for a designer?
When you say school, we're talking about like school, right? Like going to school. I don't know how to say this.
No.
Like, funny enough,
let me science or maths or computer science, or which you say is should be a very strong subject for such a student. Hello?
Nothing, I guess. Really, that's an honest answer. Like, I can't think of anything from school that has been directly translated. Of course, school makes us it gives personality, it builds a character, it teaches us how to learn. All the things that we know about the world is learned in school. But I wouldn't say any course or any particular subject will help over the other.
Right, okay. Okay, the next question is from Mr. Advik Madhav. It's a great point about voice assistant having to take the blame mostly. Do you think that voice and audio interactions will be given more importance now that touching random surfaces is frowned upon?
Yes, it's not only because touching is frowned upon, it's also because we were not doing voice all this time because it was hard to do. It was not like we chose not to do it. The moment it's possible, and if it's going to be better, there are so many use cases around us which can be enhanced by voice interactions. Basically, it gives an opportunity to do multitasking really well. You can be cooking in your kitchen while you're instructing someone to do something. It's almost like you have a personal assistant next to you, right? Like, you can constantly give them tasks, they'll do whatever you want them to do. So that power has not been that potential has not been fully actualized, just because we haven't perfected the voice interaction yet. But pretty much unanimously, everyone agrees that the future will have voice interaction as the predominant, like dominating interaction. Screens will fade away surely.
Okay. Thank you, Suresh. Another question to which I'm clubbing few more questions. Like there are some students who are involved in developing and publishing apps on the Play Store, and there are few other students who are like interested in the designing activities in their school level or in their college level. So like, is there any activity as a student that they can take up as an extra activity that actually will help them in this field?
That's a very, very good question. I think this question I will also combine with the earlier school question. What I feel is missing in these kind of projects or hackathons or competitions, all these things are, we are kind of, our success metric is, oh, I launched an app in Play Store, or I won this prize in this hackathon, or I won first prize in the science competition. But interestingly, that's just one time. You just made it once. But none of the products that we build first time will be ever perfect. And the real quality, or I think people who give a lot of talks or people who write a lot will know this. It's always when you get the feedback, when you iterate, when you keep on repeating the same thing is when you actually kind of get to the core of it and really perfect the stuff. So that iteration I see is missing in all these competitions or hobby projects or even college projects, because the success metric is getting a grade or showing off or maybe getting a prize in something, funds and all this stuff. But I would really encourage someone to go back and see if users liked it, if someone used it or not. What if you just talk to one person, you'll realize how frustrated they are when they're using what you did, and then you'll be like, oh, okay, how do I fix it? And then that learning that goes behind it is such a good, like a good thing that students can go through.
Okay, great. Okay, this is another basic question. Like, have you learned or did you learn any programming language in your process of this career?
I did learn, but it's not really required that you have to learn. It gives you an edge over other designers. And sometimes when engineers are talking really, really complicated engineering problems, if you have a good understanding of how computers work, you don't have to know programming languages, but you have to have a good understanding of how backend systems work. When they say the database will have this problem, you need to understand that so that you won't be asking a lot of questions in the table, and that just drags the conversation, or they just think that you're dumb sometimes. Just because everyone thinks what they know is very obvious and the rest of the world is dumb. That's how people think. So I think I would encourage, instead of learning programming languages, understanding how the computing world works, really, like not by knowing too many names or anything, but really speaking, like, can you explain to a child how internet works? Can you explain to someone why an app crashes, or why there is a spinning wheel in YouTube when the internet is slow? Like, these are simple things, but it's very complicated to explain. So I would say understand the technology process or how things are built really well, so that when you're proposing a solution, or when someone says, oh, that's not possible, you can say, no, why is it not possible? And you can actually kind of argue with them and also be persuasive about it. So yeah, that is my response.
Right. Okay. So the next question is from Mr. Aprajit. Is it useful to learn Adobe XD or Figma before we learn app development or web development?
Yep. It's they both do very different things. So Figma is purely for design, even XD is for design. I think XD has a little bit of, I think you can use it to even create stuff at the end of the day. What you'll get out of it is different things. One is app development will actually have an app in the end of the day and it'll work. So of course we can't put that down. But with Figma, what you'll learn is to quickly make changes. So you can make something, show it to someone, and they will say, this is not good, that is not good. Literally in front of them, you can move things around and you can ask, like, what about this? Do you like this over that? Kind of questions are possible. Whereas with an app, you can never do that. Any change in an app takes a long time. So it depends on what you're looking for, basically.
Okay, thank you. So another question, like there are few questions similar to this, like a lot of them have posted about HCI. So they study HCI at Georgia Tech, and it's posted that they do not focus much on UX research in AI, but focus more on UXD. So why do you think that is?
I don't know why, but I would put it this way. So AI is a very, very new field, even for all the designers in the world. Like when I studied design, I didn't even know AI exists or what is the problem with it and all that. So we can't expect such a new thing to be in a course already. So that is just impractical to expect. I think we are just like from Google and Facebook and Apple, we are just coming up with the first set of instructions like, hey, we are the only few companies who are having this problem. So we are giving away free information to people saying like, learn this stuff, you need to deal with AI very soon. And interesting enough, Apple did this 10 years ago when they were the best design company in the world. They launched something called the Human Interface Manual or something. That's the first HCI manual from company. Anyway, all this to say that I don't know why they focus more on UX design than UX research. Maybe it's the professors who are behind it or the people who set the curriculum. They are more focused on that. Also, there is another possibility that few people believe that you can't be like, what do you call, master at everything, right? Like if you put more research and design together, you can't learn both really well. So maybe they're trying to optimize the course for designers. And if you want researchers, if you want to become a UX researcher, you can go and take maybe a specific UX research course.
Okay, right. Okay, now another question, like as someone who is self-taught designer and looking to transition into UI or UX, what steps or projects or strategy would you recommend to end up with a job in companies like Google or so?
One of the common recommendation I always give is to do sample projects so that when you're in an interview or even when you apply, you'll have a portfolio of work to show. And what I won't recommend you doing is going and taking IRCTC website or Flipkart website and saying, I would do this so differently. See, I have done such a great job of this. Nobody wants to see that because IRCTC is not doing it for reason. There is some technical backlog or something will be there. And it's too naive of us to just assume that we will just redesign something that big very easily. And generally it's frowned upon also if you just do that. So what I would recommend is to take design problems at a bite-sized design problems and really solve that. For example, let's say Instagram has a particular scroll behavior. It's kind of weird because it can scroll in between photos. So sometimes when you're scrolling, half the photo will be kind of cropped by a screen. So as a designer, you might be wondering like, why is it the case? Why can't we just snap the screen whenever there is a photo, it just neatly snaps. I can open the comment. These are like such basic solutions that are there, but nobody seems to be working on it. Maybe there is a reason, but still, if you solve it at that level, then it's a good conversation in an interview. They will ask like, how else will you solve it? And then you can say 10 other solutions. They will kind of have an opportunity to understand how you solve a problem. Whereas going and redesigning the whole Instagram is a bad idea. So those are the things that I would recommend.
Okay, so one question for which I know the answer, but you will have to tell to others. So could you tell us about your journey from biotech to US? To UX? What inspired you to change your career path?
I am going to be brutally honest. It might be very, very bad answer, but I need to be honest because it's important. Like everyone discovers what they like to do at some point in time. I was one of those guys who liked making movies and making like posters for Rivera, kind of what do you call it, cultural fest and everything. But what really hit me hard is that I was very bad in core science. Like my biochemistry understanding was terrible. And with that kind of basic weakness, I was suffering a lot in the course. I was not understanding what's going on. And also I didn't like the turnaround time. Like in core biotech, if you want to stick to the research side and publishing kind of style, it took a while to earn a lot of money or to kind of see some rewarding thing in your career. Whereas in design or in computer world, it was very quick. Like you do something today, you see the output, you can iterate quickly. That whole fast-paced lifestyle and of course, a lot of money also attracted me to this.
Right. Okay, so there are few questions on the same area. Like, is it necessary or compulsory to learn artificial intelligence for the upcoming youth? And like, is there a possibility that AI would replace designers as well?
Yeah, it is very important to learn what AI is. Again, at the very same level of me telling, don't learn programming, but understand how computers work. Same thing. You don't have to learn how to make artificial intelligence, but you should really understand what it is because very soon it's going to be everywhere. And if you're educated with it, you will have different ways to deal with it. It will maybe replace some aspects of designers. For example, the looking good aspect, like making the designs in the end, that may be easily replaced by AI. But I think still the problem solving is very cognitively stressful job. And that kind of creative problem solving aspect, I don't see any other AI system still competing. So I'm not saying it's not possible. I just don't see it happening in the next 10 years time.
Okay, the last two generalized questions, like how do you generally overcome a creative block?
Oh God, that's a very hard question. it's yeah, everyone has their own thing. I have a distraction mechanism where I go and do something totally random, like I'll go watch a movie or I'll just go and sleep or go for a walk. And generally the good ideas come when you're not thinking about it. So you kind of internalize a problem for a while. You soak yourself into it. Your whole team sits together. You spend a week and you don't have any solution. Just take a break over a weekend. You're just like cycling or you're taking a shower or something, and suddenly it'll just magically appear in your head. And it just takes time. You just have to appreciate the fact that it'll happen to you, and it will happen. So that's how it has been working with me so far.
Right. And in general, how stressful are designers in this field?
Design as such is not a stressful job, but if you work for certain companies, it is very stressful. So it depends on the company and the product and the team and your manager. A lot of those things kind of gets influenced. In the industry, we always know that Amazon, Apple, and Tesla are like super stressful companies to work for. Microsoft, Google, IBM, Facebook, all these are like very lightweight companies. Like you can have your work-life balance, all that. So if you talk to people, they'll tell you whether the company is a stressful company.
Okay, right. So the last question. So how would you recommend an engineering team to learn about UX, or what do you feel engineers should know about designing?
This is very, very important. And we are doing a lot of initiative to make sure like engineers who are hired inside Google learn this and in their onboarding process itself. But for folks who are outside, there is no one way to learn this except really if you observe what's going on, you'll learn it. For example, take any app that you use on a consistent basis, whether it's Ola or Flipkart or Amazon or Netflix or any digital app that you use on a regular basis, even Gmail, whatever it is, and consistently observe the changes they do and question yourself, why do they do that? Is it competition? Is it making things better? And observe those little changes. Like suddenly they'll change the visual language. Suddenly they'll space things differently. Suddenly the button would have moved from one place to another. It might look like a simple overhaul, but it does. I think that sensitivity around like people are changing things based on some logic. That sensitivity, if you can bring it in engineers, I think that will do the job. Like rest of the things is just process. It's easy to teach, but that sensitivity is the hardest part.
Okay, so thank you, Suresh. There's been a lot of questions and you've answered all of them. And it's been a very interactive session also. And at this point of time, I would like to make a note that some of the group of participants had been a mixed group. Say we had participants from school students, college students, professors, faculties, and it's a mixed group, and hence we had a mixed set of questions. But then if there are any specific sensible questions that as a student that you could help on, we would request you to share some contact in the chat box, which students can actually maybe mail you or ask you in person if they cannot put it up here.
I'm using Zoom for the first time, so I don't know how. Okay, chat
Yeah,
it
no,
on.
that's okay. I'll put it that you can just send it to me. I
Sorry.
will put it
No,
on the
I'm
chat
just.
box. And another thing, like there's also representation from our faculty members here. Like there's in VIT Vellore, there's already bachelors of designing and masters of designing programs in the field, and they are also about to start UX design programs quite soon.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So
Awesome.
that's been a like quite an impressive session and inspiring session on that note. So thank you so much, Suresh, for having taken your time and addressed the gathering on this. So on behalf of VIT and VIT Alumni Association, we would like to thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Have a good one,
you.
guys.